character. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Round one.
Good morning. At the DOGE subcommittee, we are continuing our war on waste. That means rooting out spending that is unnecessary, wasteful, and frankly, un-American. Today, we are looking at the more than $500 million federal taxpayers spend annually to fund public radio and television. A big chunk of this subsidy flows to National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service. NPR and PBS are the big DC-based entities that create and distribute much of the news and educational content heard and seen on public radio and TV stations across the country. Fast forward a few decades, Americans are increasingly consuming digital media and podcasts. The audience of public radio and television is declining. Your public statements and social media posts reflect left-wing ideology and blatant opposition to free speech. After all, you were the head of Wikipedia for many years, which is a platform that doesn't tell the truth. Let's walk through some of your statements so the public can understand your personal views. You said your fellow Americans just elected Donald Trump as president again this past November. You called him a deranged racist and sociopath. You posted on X that America is addicted to white supremacy. You've publicly chastised using the phrase boy and girl, which you said erases the language for non-binary people.
Come on, man.
There's only two genders, by the way.
Gotcha, bitch.
Ms. Maher, the federal funding that your outlet receives comes from all American taxpayer dollars, not just from your viewers who support such statements as these. Let me inform you, that your federal funding is also paid for by the other half of the country, the 77 million Americans who voted for President Trump, someone you called a deranged racist sociopath.
You are fake news.
The only speech you like seems to be speech that you agree with. In 2021, you called the First Amendment the number one challenge in American journalism because it makes it hard to crack down on bad information. You said in a TED Talk that our reverence for the truth might be a distraction. You've also expressed support for deplatforming individuals you view as fascist. Who do you think should be charged with cracking down on so-called bad information? Is it NPR? Is it the government? Is it you, Ms. Maher?
Congresswoman, Madam Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to address this. I know.
Is it up to you and NPR to crack down on bad information or decide the truth? Answer the question, yes or no, Ms. Maher.
Absolutely not. I'm a very strong believer in free speech, and I believe that more speech.
Your public statements say otherwise. Ms. Maher, in 2021, when speaking at an Atlantic Council event, you said that when you were CEO of Wikipedia, you took a very active approach to disinformation and misinformation. During the COVID pandemic and the 2020 election, you said you censored information through conversations with government. Which governments were those, Ms. Maher? The Biden administration, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Wikipedia never censored any information.
These are your public statements, Ms. Maher. PBS News is not just left-leaning, but it is actively uses taxpayer funds to push some of the most radical left positions, like featuring a drag queen on the show Let's Learn, a show targeted toward young children ages 3 to 8 years old. I want you to know I grew up watching children's programming on PBS. And as a mother who raised 3 children, I felt confident that I could leave the room while my own children were watching children's programming on PBS. But I can tell you right now, Ms. Kruger, specifically, as a mother, if I had walked in my living room or one of my children's bedrooms and seen this child predator and this monster targeting my children,
I would become unglued. And that is how most parents feel all over this country. This is not the only example of them sexualizing and grooming children. They've been doing it for over the last decade. In 2015, PBS produced Frontline put out a documentary, Growing Up Trans, that takes viewers on an intimate and eye-opening journey inside the struggles and choices facing transgender kids and their families. This means that PBS is one of the founders of the trans child abuse industry, all while taking taxpayer money. Brainwashing and transing children is an issue so hated by parents across the country that it was a driving force in the landslide Republican and Trump victory in the 2024 election cycle and presidential race. The news that these entities produced is either resented or increasingly tuned out and turned off by most of the hardworking Americans who are forced to pay for it. They no longer view NPR and PBS as trusted news sources. As a matter of fact, with these people, they're a threat. In fact, when Elon Musk put his hand over his heart and extended it and told the American people his heart goes out to them, PBS News posted the clip, called it a fascist Nazi salute, and described how it was similar to the same Heil used by Nazis at their victory rallies. Not once did PBS or NPR report on the numerous accounts of Democrats making the same gesture. Why wasn't this treated exactly the same way? NPR hosts interviewed Adam Schiff, then the top Democrat of the House Intelligence Committee, 25 times about Trump and Russia, but they made no apologies when the Mueller report found no evidence that the Trump campaign had colluded with Russia, because they did not. Berliner also described NPR's passionate embrace of the left-wing DEI ideology that Americans clearly reject, as evidenced by the November elections. NPR's language and style guides were shaped by race and gender-based affinity groups that dominated the internal culture of the organization. And NPR journalists were to ask everyone they interviewed their race, gender, and ethnicity, and enter it into a centralized tracking system. This tracking system embeds DEI into the fibers of its content.
What?
Sounds like racism to me. It's a software attached to NPR's content management system where these reporters and producers submit information about their sources' race and ethnicity, gender identity, geographic location, that's kind of scary, and age range. The tool allows NPR to track the demographics of their sources in real time to allow for source diversity. The irony of these supposed diverse sources is that NPR has no real interest in diversity, like having diverse viewpoints. Berliner tried to sound the alarm on this when he checked voter registration records of the editors at DC's NPR headquarters and found 87 registered Democrats and 0 registered Republicans. But NPR treated Berliner like a political dissident in the old Soviet Union. He was driven out of the organization and forced to resign. Sounds like communism. And the ringleader of that effort was NPR's then newly appointed CEO, Katherine Mayer, who is before us today. She dismissed Mr. Berliner's wake-up call as profoundly disrespectful, hurtful, and demeaning. In other words, instead of viewing it as a chance to finally right the ship at NPR, she doubled down. In doing so, she made it clear how any further internal dissent would be dealt with on her watch. That does sound like communist China at the taxpayer's expense. And no one should be surprised. NPR installed her in the top job after Ms. Maher was firmly on record with a litany of public comments and social media posts displaying her ultra-progressive views, her scorn for free speech, and her fondness for censorship. So now it's up to Congress to determine if Americans are going to continue to provide her and the organization that put her in charge willingly, after they knew these things, with taxpayer funds to continue to pursue their progressive or rather communist agenda. For far too long, federal taxpayers have been forced to fund biased news. This needs to come to an end, and it needs to come to an end now.
Here comes a new